In this video, I'm going to be sowing some sunflowers. I'm going to be transplanting some sunflowers into bigger pots, and I'm not going to be planting them out in the garden, and I'm going to show you why. Now, the reason I don't plant my sunflowers, or I'm certainly not going to this year, is because every year I'm sort of really hasty and think, well, sunflowers are big, they grow fast, they'll be fine surviving in the garden. But strangely enough, in my garden, in our temperate climate here in the UK, where our summers just more gradually get hot rather than suddenly get hot, these sunflowers do take a little bit of a back seat, especially during our late spring season, where everything else that's a cool flower, such as the ranunculus and everything, and the sweet peas, they are way more suited to these conditions, and so they grow and bulk up like crazy, and they do tend to drown out the sunflowers. Now, by doing so, they leave the sunflowers buried under the shade of these more luscious leaves and plants, and then they become obviously prey for slugs, and even the birds pick at them. So I have worked out, and I don't know why it's taken me so long to work this out. I guess because I'm juggling so many gardening plates in my head, I kind of neglected to think about them really. But the fact is, they don't do well in my garden if they're planted out too early, because as I say, they are late to the party. They like to take a little bit more time to get ready. If you're watching from a hotter climate where your spring is much shorter and your summer comes on hot and fast and quick, then you can plant them out now. And conversely, if you're in a colder climate, then you will need to transplant into pots and still keep them in the greenhouse. My climate is middle of the road, so I'm planting them into pots, but they will be able to stay outside in those pots now that we've hit May. My lowest temperature last night, for instance, was 11 degrees C, and of course that's well over 50 Fahrenheit if you prefer that measurement. You will notice that I had sewed these in those foil trays. So if you want to see how I sew in foil trays, then check out my video, which I will link below in the description. And I demonstrate a very nifty way to make them deeper and more sturdy. Now, when I'm transplanting the sunflowers, as you can see here, they have really long roots. So people say they don't like being transplanted, and I think that's because quite often when you see sunflowers transplanted, they are transplanted into quite small and short pots. Well, if you think how tall they would like to grow, and you can see here how long their roots are, I decided that I didn't really have enough pots that were suitable to transplant each one of these. So I fashioned my own pots, and here's how I did it. So after realizing I just didn't have enough deep pots like this lovely yellow one here, I decided to use my winter sowing bottles and when I say winter sowing bottles, they're just water bottles, and I save them all up, as we have water, and I save them up, and then I use them in the winter if I need to use them for a cloche or, just for winter sowing, as extra containers. And so I thought, well, they're nice and tall. They'll make a perfect container for each one of these sunflowers, and they'll really nicely fit those deep, long roots into the bottom. So I basically cut off the top third where the lid is, obviously add drainage holes, and then I top them up with soil. I had to kind of suspend the bulk of the sunflower root above because I wanted the length of the root to be down. I didn't want the whole sunflower to be down at the bottom. I wanted the whole root to sort of stretch up through the bottle, and the root ball is almost at the top there, so that the longer roots are down in the bottom. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. Anyway, so then and because I had all the bottles for the winter sowing, I could basically plant them all the same. And it's quite nice when you're doing a certain crop of flower or veg or whatever, if you can have the same pots, which is also why I like the full containers, because there is a limitless supply of those. And for me, there is also a huge number of these bottles that I recycle. So you can see here, I'm holding the root ball at the top and allowing the length of the root to dangle right down to the bottom, and then I drop the soil around and then I bed it in. And I felt as if the sunflower just breathed a sigh of relief the moment it was planted up. So I went through and I did them all in this way. And while I was doing it, I was thinking, you could actually, now that they have some height on them because they're in the bottle and they're raised above ground, they've got a better chance. If I was to sort of stage them in various parts of the garden to see how they would look or where they might fit, I could kind of put them out into the garden now. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to keep them together in one spot, but you could do that. Because they've just got now that they're a bit taller, they've got a bit more height. They're going to sort of stand up above the more bushy plants, and they've got a good chance, a better chance anyway, of survival. And then, of course, here they are, and you can see how good they all look in the same pot. You know what they are at a glance, and they're all uniformly planted, which just pleases me really no end. So I've just got to find a spot to put them. But first, I'm actually going to feed them now that they're a bit bigger. I also have a video on these homemade, organic, safe feeds for your sunflowers, and I'm going to use the full range of the NPK, so that's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And the phosphorus is kind of the grass and the leaves in this jar, and then I've got nitrogen and potassium in this brown jar made up of coffee grounds and banana skins, and you can see how rich the colour is there. So I'm just going to mix a couple of each into this full watering can and then stir it around, and that's going to give these sunflowers a good feed. And then there will be some left over which I'll use on other plants. But you can see here this phosphorus, you can see how the water's gone green, so all that goodness and all those nutrients are now in the water. Don't forget, I'll link that video in the description below. It costs nothing. It's a fabulous feed. All right, give it a stir and then feed those sunflowers. And once I've got that done, I'm going to go and plant some sunflowers because this just isn't enough sunflowers here to keep me going through the summer. So I'm going to go and plant some more. Let's go and see what I'm planting. But before I show you all my sunflowers, the varieties of sunflowers that I have and which ones I'm going to plant today, don't forget to subscribe and like if you are enjoying this video and you're getting something from it, and also share with any of your gardening friends. So these are the smaller foil trays that I'm going to be planting my sunflowers in. And the reason I'm using smaller ones is because I am planting a wider variety of sunflowers. So I kind of want to contain each variety within its own pack. And I'm only going to be sowing 4 to 6 seeds in each one of these little brownie pies, I call them. So I didn't want to use the big roasting trays that I used in the other video, but I also do demonstrate these smaller trays in the video as well. And when I say the video, of course, I mean my other video, which I'll link in the description. So I had various varieties. I had branching sunflowers, dwarf sunflowers, single-headed sunflowers, procrut sunflowers, sunflowers with pollen, sunflowers without pollen. And in the end, I decided to do 3 taller style sunflowers. Oh no, in fact 4, sorry. And then 3 dwarf ones. So the taller ones are, on the left, you have Garden Statement, that paler yellow one. The one without a picture is Vanilla Ice, which is the same variety as the ones I've just transplanted. The orangey red one after that is Autumn Beauty, and then the fluffy looking one is Sun King. And then the dwarf varieties I've got, the one at the back, the fluffy looking one again, is Firefox. The one in the middle, the Suttons, is Wahoo or Wahoo. I don't even know how you pronounce that. And then the one at the front is Little Dorrit, which is an F1 sunflower. I did, because I had a tray left, I did plant some Black Magic, but I don't really like them. I just had some seeds left over from a previous year and I thought I might as well use them. So I'm not going to make a big production out of sowing them. It's not rocket science. I sow them, I basically sort of put them on the surface at equal distances apart, about 1 inch. And I sowed about 6 to 8 in each one. It's kind of dependent on the size of the seed. Some of these seeds were smaller than others, so I kind of used that as my guide. And so some have 5 in, some have 8 in. And then once I've got them laid on the surface and I can see they're nicely spaced apart, I then just sort of push them down with my finger, and then just I pinch the soil back over the top of them, and that's it. And of course label them, and that's it. I don't need to feed these because they're only babies, so they're probably going to have enough energy in these little in the fresh compost that's in here until I transplant them, and then when I transplant them I will feed them. So because they're not going to be in here that long, they just don't need that much space. And so that was really it. So I'm really pleased with getting all these sunflowers done, because I do have a space at the where I planted the new hedge, and you have to watch my videos back to know where the hedge is. I'm going to show you in a minute actually. Where I planted the hedge last year, which has now bulked up a bit, I wanted to plant a sunflower kind of hedge in front of it. But it's always been a bit weedy, to be honest, and a bit neglected because I've just been waiting for the hedge to take off, and I was too busy focusing on my other borders. But I definitely want to dig that out now, and then I'll have a sort of a dedicated space for these sunflowers that will form a backdrop to my other borders, because I don't think they'll fit in my actual cottage garden borders. So I'm going to kind of create that kind of border at the back where they can just shine there and be a backdrop to the rest of the garden. So I hope that'll work. And really, when I say I hope that'll work, what I really mean is I hope I've got time, and I hope I don't try and the soil there is very clayey because it hasn't been improved. I don't think anything apart from the hedge, and that's just little pockets of improvement. The rest of it has just been lawn for years. So it's never been a border. It's never been improved with compost. So it could be a bit of a challenge. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to enrich that soil, break it up enough, make it good enough that these sunflowers can grow and thrive there. Anyway, that's my plan for the sunflowers. That's what I've done with my sunflowers so far. And I think the water bottles for the transplanting is just a really good idea. And don't forget, the reason I transplant is because of the kind of spring that we have. It just means we get these sort of jungly early plants, which do tend to swamp out in the first instance the sunflowers, because the sunflowers take off when it gets that much hotter. So that's why I'm going to keep them separate until the conditions are right, and then they can go out in the garden when it's their turn to shine. All right, if you found this video helpful, have I already said that? I have, but please subscribe anyway. Thank you, and I'll see you again in my next video. Bye.